The following comes from Keith in California. Art, when my wife and I were first married, about 30 years ago, I was a stockbroker and she was, well, a housewife. We purchased a new home in a housing tract that was built upon an old horse ranch in the northwest side of the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. Well, I always thought there was something not quite right about the house in the area, but didn't give it a lot of thought. You know, and always here or there for no reason. Well, one night around 10 o'clock, my wife and I went to bed. She was wearing a purple flannel outfit, nothing unusual. Just another night in the valley. We'd been there for about 20 minutes. I'd not yet quite fallen asleep, just, sort of in and out of the twilight zone, thinking about that day's events. I looked over at the bathroom, 10 feet away. The door was open, and the nightlight was on. There, at the bathroom door, my wife was standing. I was a bit surprised and asked her, "What are you doing up?" She said, "Huh?" And it was evident by her response that she was in the bed next to me. As soon as she said, "Huh," the image standing at the door vanished. Thanks, Keith. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hello, Art.
Hello.
This is Everett from Oregon. Let's see on 1190 KX.
Ah, yes, the powerhouse in Portland.
Yeah. I gotta set this story up. I'm a little nervous. It's the first time I ever talked to anybody on the radio.
All right, well, just take a good deep breath and tell us like it is.
Okay.
Or was.
Okay, me and my sisters and my parents all lived in this house in Milwaukee, Oregon. And my oldest sister Karen lived she slept up in the attic. And she kept on hearing, like, at nighttime she'd hear scratching and, like, growling noises.
Growling?
Growling noises.
Scratching, maybe mice, maybe rats. Growling, not good.
Yeah, so she kept on complaining about it to my parents, so they moved her downstairs with us. And then one night, I woke up and I was scared to go to the bathroom by myself because I was only like 5 or 6 years old. And so I woke up my middle sister. She's like, in age group, middle, okay. And asked her if she'd help me go to the bathroom, walk me to the bathroom. So we walked down the hall. And
you had to get your sister was how old?
She was, I don't even know. I was 5 or 6, so she must have been, 8 or 9.
And you had to get your sister to help you to the bathroom?
Well, yeah, because I was scared. I was always scared of the dark when I was younger.
All right.
Okay, so we're walking down the hall to the bathroom, and we look out into the living room because there's a doorway. And the couch goes sliding across the living room.
What?
The couch goes sliding across the living room.
While you're watching it?
Yes, and this huge hand, looks like King Kong's hand, comes out from behind it.
Oh, man.
And it starts, moving towards us, so we run back to the room, And I jump in my bed, and I throw the covers over my head, and I sit there for, I don't know even how long. And
Are you sure now that this was not your bladder preparing to explode?
It's possible. I don't know.
I mean...
My sister saw it, too, so I don't know.
Doesn't sound like it. All right, so you ran back to the bedroom.
Yeah.
That's what I would have done, yes.
And I pull up, after I don't even know how long, I pull the covers up, and I see this thing, and there's no way, with the size that it was, it could have passed through the doorway, but it was hovering over us, And then it just seemed to go away, and I must have waited for 2 or 3 hours. And then I was like, I have got to go to the bathroom, And so I got my sisters to help me go back, to walk me again. And we got to the bathroom this time.
Yes.
And
I don't mean to laugh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, I know. But, okay, so then when we were walking back, the door handle to going up to the attic was rattling. And the door was,
God.
There's a whole bunch of stuff with this house, but that was the big one.
Oh, that's a big one, all right. So it was basically, it was a hand after you.
Yeah, it was gigantic. It looked like King Kong's hand. It filled up the whole living room. And the next morning, the couch was moved out a little bit, but it wasn't thrown across the living room like it was. So,
oh, sir, I'm laughing because that one scares me.
I'm serious. That's what I saw. I was only 5 or 6, so I don't know, but
Five or six is old enough never to forget that.
Yeah, I always remember that.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Oh, I don't know if I like that one at all. A giant hand moving this couch, sliding it fast across the floor, and then chasing you into the bedroom. And your already swollen bladder, you fling yourself into bed as you know you would, right? I would. And there's the hand above the bed. International line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, Art. It's Elizabeth in Oshawa.
Oshawa.
Yes,
Okay.
Ontario.
Ontario.
Just east of Toronto.
Very welcome.
Listen, you know that computer of yours, when it went belly up, it actually hissed. I could hear it.
Well, you know what? Actually, I tell you, my computer has screwed up before, and half the time it's been cockpit error. It's been me. This time, no way. In the mode that it was in, it could have only done one thing. I had one command into it, and that was to do a stinger, that revolting little sound that we're forced to play.
Yeah.
And it could not have done what it did, but it did it. These kinds of things happen during these shows, and I'm getting used to it. Anyway.
That's what makes it fun.
Anyway, you go right ahead.
Well, and listen, just quickly, while you were telling that dog story,
yes,
as the ghost was disappearing, dissipating,
yes,
I have a dingo, and he came in from the other room, smiled up at me, put his tongue on the phone, right on the mouthpiece.
Put his tongue on the mouthpiece of the phone?
Yeah, while you were talking about that dog, and he was smiling, he has a smile, and then he just settled right down, and he's sleeping.
And a dingo, that's from Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, he's a cattle dog. He's partly German Shepherd, and he's just gorgeous. His radar ears.
Well, maybe he just appreciated that story.
Well, I don't know. He's kind of psychic. He comes when I think about him.
So he gave us a little tongue, that's all.
Yeah, he was just kissing the phone.
I hear you.
Well, listen, I got a funny story for you. You were talking about people, artists being night people and so on. Well, I'm one of those, and I'm also an actual clairvoyant medium. And for many years, I couldn't just figure out what to do with all this. So I took myself to a little spiritualist church in Toronto that had been there for many years. And I was pretty skeptical about the whole deal, but I needed to find out what this was going on with me. So during the service, a guest medium, it was a very nice elderly lady. She didn't know me from Adam. But she came over to me and put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "My dear, I have a message from an aunt, a vibration aunt." And she said, "Her name is Bert." And she kind of thought that was odd for a lady. And then she said, "Oh, it's Bertha. Did you have an aunt you called Bert?" And I said, "That's right." Well, she says to tell you, my dear, that the tears you've shed for so long will soon be over. And that was the end of the message. And I kind of had an idea what she was talking about, but I wasn't sure. And so on my way home, I was in the subway and waiting on the platform, and I was just wandering around. Suddenly, something made me turn around. And hanging in the air was like light, more than life-size, and it was my aunt's ex-husband who was deceased.
In the middle of the air?
Yeah, like clairvoyant. It was just like a big TV screen, superimposed.
Yes.
Hanging. I see things like that quite often, but it always startles me. And there he is, hanging in the air, just from his arms up, and he had them folded, and he was smoking this big cigar, and which was usual for him. But I couldn't figure out, well, what the heck am I seeing Uncle Zach for, And so I puzzled all the way home, and that thought just stayed with me. I could actually still see it in my mind.
Sure.
Anyway, a few weeks later, I was at work. Phone rang, and it was my mother to tell me that my aunt that lived with her sister, had been a nurse for many, many years, and she had fallen, and we thought she had broken her hip, but she wouldn't let her call an ambulance. So I had to rush up to the house and get the ambulance and go through all that and get her in the hospital. Well, she survived that, but she died of pneumonia. So a few weeks after that was all over, I was in my apartment, and I was standing at the kitchen thinking all of a sudden, you know how you get that little feeling on the back of your neck that you should turn around, there's somebody looking at you?
Of course, it's an unmistakable feeling. We all
Yeah,
have it,
yeah, it's just like somebody taps you on the neck.
And?
And I turned around, and the same thing, my uncle and my aunt were together, and they were just hanging in the air smiling. The funny part is my aunt had on her old nursing cap and her blue nursing cape that she hadn't worn that for years.
Well,
But
there
it was
you
the
are.
kind they wore when they were young nurses, you know, in the 40s, 30s.
So they were there to show you they were together and happy.
They were together, and they had come to say goodbye. But the funny part is they hadn't been friends for years. They'd been divorced for years.
Well, who knows what it's going to be like in the afterlife. Thank you very much for that call. A lot of times, you know, you've got to wonder, particularly if you've been married a few times. You know, we talk about soulmates, and we talk about who's going to be over there on the other side and all of that. Well, if you've been married several times, what if it's your ex waiting for you? What if your ex is... That little thought. I mean, everybody always, the current relationship, right, is all that. You certainly imagine would be waiting for you on the other side, should you die at this time. But it may not be that way. It may be your hellish shrew of an ex is over there waiting for you. But then that couldn't be heaven, could it? First time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Good morning, Art. How are you?
I'm all right. Where are you?
My name is Michael Coleman. I'm president of the Ghost Hunter Society based here in Schaumburg, Illinois.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
What, you guys actually hunt ghosts?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Then you
Yeah,
have a good...
specialize
Then
equipment.
if you were to select the best of your stories, what would it be?
Well, actually, I'll tell you a story. Just before I formed the Ghost Hunter Society, it was one of my first hands-on ghost hunting experiences. Now, my family's been riddled with ghost stories, and I've experienced some weird things in my time, but this particular story took place in the northwest suburbs at the time it was a restaurant. Unfortunately, I can't divulge where that is.
That's fine.
But I happen to know the night manager there. And he invited us over. We didn't know why. He knew my interest in the paranormal. So he invited myself and a friend, and we stayed after closing hours. And he proceeded to tell me that strange things were going on in this restaurant. For instance, some of the wait staff were feeling pushes and pinches, turning around, and no one was there.
Pinches?
Temperature would fluctuate. Computers, oddly enough, just like yours, would go a little haywire. The chandelier in the grand ballroom would start swinging back and forth on its own. And one of the oddest things that occurred at this establishment was an elevator. Now, it just seems like a normal elevator, but this elevator would travel between floors, up and down, only at night. I had a hard time believing it. So I had him take us on a small tour of the basement area, places that normal customers didn't have access to. And we walked around, and he showed us the elevator shaft. Now, mind you, there were only 4 of us in this restaurant. Himself, his assistant manager, myself, and my friend Scott.
Right.
We are all downstairs in the basement. He shows us the small wine cellar, which is right next to the elevator shaft service area.
Yes.
He opens up the service area shaft, and we all step inside, and he goes, look how small this is. As soon as he says that, the elevator starts coming down on top of us. Now, no one else in the
man,
restaurant.
that's like it's been my horror. That's one of those things, along with falling in a crack in the earth, that I've always had this, to imagine an elevator coming down on top of you is like the biggest horror, next to falling in a crack in the ground, I could even think of, to get crushed, to get mushed by an elevator coming down when you could... Listen, you want to hold it right there, and we'll let you finish up the story after the
Sure.
break. Stay right where you are. All right, well, I already hate this story, but here we go back to it. Elevator coming down.
Well, the elevator coming down wasn't as fast as you'd think.
Well, that would make it worse. I mean, even slow. Even
Slow
as-
impending doom.
Oh, yeah, slow impending doom is right, yes.
So, needless to say, we experienced the same feelings that you described, and headed out of that elevator shaft, regrouped back up in the central area. Where he proceeded to tell us, the night manager proceeded to tell us that more experiences had occurred up in the upstairs level, from the waitstaff of the pinching and the pushing. So I decided to go up there on my own, and everyone else stayed down below. Afraid to follow me up there.
I thought only girls in low-cut gowns did that kind of stuff, but all right.
At this point, I think that they didn't want to experience anything else that evening, but
Right.
I had just gotten warmed up, so I wanted to go upstairs and check out the upstairs level. Well, as I was going up the stairs, the night manager had also told me that an apparition was seen on that same stairway that I was ascending.
Great.
So as I ascended up this dark stairway up into the upper level, of course all the lights were off, I proceeded to walk around, and about 5 minutes, I felt a cold spot in the middle of the dining room.
Yes.
At that point, I had heard footsteps coming up the stairway, only to find that it was my friend Scott, who has now become my administrative officer for the organization, and he joined me in trying to find this cold spot. Now, keep in mind, this was a July evening. Temperature outside was relatively about 82, 83 degrees.
Right.
And we're inside the building, and we felt this cold spot about 20 degrees lower than the ambient temperature.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty frigid. So I immediately, unfortunately, I didn't know that this was going to be a ghost hunt. Otherwise, I would have brought my equipment along. The only thing I had with me was my friend's lighter. So I proceeded to go around the air conditioning vents to see if the air conditioning was on, see if the flame flickered at all, and it didn't. We quickly found the cold spot again, and it started to move. It moved along the entire length of the dining room.
You could actually follow it?
Yeah, it was actually...
And you could go in and out of it?
Exactly. It wasn't like a force pushing type of a feeling, but you would feel it, and then it would almost pass through you, and then you'd pick it up again.
I understand.
So we followed it back, and I was on one side of it, my friend Scott was on the other. And I had stopped again. It pushed me, well, not pushed, but had backed us up to a wall. My back was facing the wall, my friend Scott was facing me. Then I see my friend Scott's eyes just light up and look behind me. And I'm thinking, well, what could possibly be behind me? There's a wall behind me. Turns out, I had backed up against the elevator doors. And the elevator doors were now opening. And,
oh, my God, you were about to walk backwards into the... Oh, my.
Well, the elevator was there.
It was there.
But previously, it was on the lower floor. Because it had descended down upon us.
Yeah.
So now this elevator we had proof that it had actually moved between floors at night by itself.
Yes.
And I rode the elevator down while my friend Scott did not. He went down the stairway.
You got on the damn thing?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Like I
it's
said,
no
I-
wonder you're in the business now, because none of us would do any of that junk.
Anyways, I followed it down and entered into the main floor area where everyone was away in the back room where no one was able to push the call. But my friend Scott had then met me downstairs, and we decided to call it an evening, and I would come back and do a full investigation later on. Well, as we were leaving, we noticed that the window on that second floor, near that elevator, had been frosted over.
Frosted over.
Frosted over.
So that's
all
where
the
the-
windows were fine. Now, keep in
That's
mind,
where
like
the
I said,
cold
this was
spot
July
went.
evening.
Yeah.
And now, consequently, in an epilogue, I tried following up to see if I could get back in there. The night manager that I knew had consequently quit, claiming that lights
Don't
were turning
blame
on and
him.
off by themselves.
Don't blame them a bit. Yep.
And I tried to see if I can get in there with the owners, and the owners had moved out of there. And another business had moved in, and 2 months later they moved out. And currently that property is on the market. I contacted the local realtor that was selling that property. And
You wanna
asked him
buy
if
it?
was actually haunted.
You want to buy it?
If I had the money, believe me, I would. There's not a whole lot of money in ghost hunting.
Maybe, well, I wonder if they're going to be required to notify the people who do buy it what's going on.
That I don't know.
There's laws about that.
I know that you should tell somebody if there was a death that had occurred in a property, you should tell them that it had occurred, although I don't know the statute of limitations.
There are laws about ghosts as well in many states.
Oh, yeah.
All right, sir, I appreciate the call, and lots of luck to you ghost hunting. But I guess you've got the personality for it based on what I just heard. I never would have done any of that. Wail of the Dead. Has anybody ever heard of Wail of the Dead? Dear Art, it was a sunny afternoon in northern Marin County, California, the day that my grandmother died. My father took his afternoon walk on the Frank Lloyd Wright Civic Center Library to return the books he checked out the previous week. On his way home, he felt a slight breeze against his neck, and he heard a deep moan come when it seemed out of nowhere. He just happened to glance down at his digital wristwatch at the exact moment of the moan, noticed the time was 2:40 p.m. He felt very uneasy because there wasn't anywhere near where he was walking, not even an animal. The path he walked home on was completely deserted. Within minutes, he arrived back home. As he entered the house just after 3 o'clock, my mother told him the sad news that she had received a phone call from the convalescent hospital where my grandmother had been living. She stated that a nurse phoned at exactly 2:50 p.m., saying my grandmother had just passed away 10 minutes previously. Weeks later, an Irish friend of my dad said that he heard of this type of thing. It's happened before. And the Irish had known this phenomenon as the Wail of the Dead. By the way, Chris in Mesa says my grandmother was 100% Irish. Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Yes, Art. My name is Sandhya, and I'm calling from Larkspur near San Francisco, California.
Welcome.
Thanks. In 1988, I experienced something that I've come to call in my mind the affair of the haunted convent. And I had been studying various healing methods with a group of friends, and our teacher decided that a smaller group of us were ready for a teacher training workshop in these methods of healing that she had developed. One of the people in this smaller group was a nun, and she arranged for us to do this workshop in a retreat convent that belonged to her order of nuns. And we met there on the first day, and all of us, except for the woman, the nun, felt a very creepy feeling in the house. The air was thick. It almost felt like we were moving underwater rather than moving through normal air.
I know the feeling.
It was very, very strange. And so we had our workshop that first day feeling rather uneasy. And then that night, the teacher of the workshop, who lived nearby, went home, and the nun went back to her convent in San Francisco because she had a meeting there early the next morning. None of us slept very well. I had dreams all night that faces were coming towards me begging for help, and had an almost sleepless night and then bad dreams when I did fall asleep. The next morning, we all got up and met for breakfast, and the teacher came back to the house, and the nun was going to be there later in the day. And the teacher walked into the house and said, "None of you slept very well, did you?" And we all agreed, and she had tuned into us during the night, and she had had very disturbing dreams as well. We compared notes. We had all had basically the same dreams of these faces coming towards us and begging to be set free.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. And we decided that we felt that whatever the spirits were in this place, that we couldn't really banish them, but we felt that they belonged to the land there. But we decided to do a kind of ceremony to ask permission whether we could stay and continue the workshop.
That really bothers me, and I'm hearing it again and again and again tonight, that the spirits, or whatever they are, appear to be attached to geographic locations, very narrow ones at that.
Mm-hmm.
But in your case, many faces begging for help.
Well, what I saw, it was faces of all the nuns who had stayed on that property over the years.
Boy, you wouldn't think nuns would be trapped.
Well, I felt that you wouldn't think that. That's what was kind of surprising about it. But I felt that maybe that anybody who had stayed on that property, and there had been a number of different buildings there over the past 150 years.
I know, but nuns are supposed to go to heaven without passing go.
Well, that was what was surprising to us. And the other thing that we thought was odd was that the nun who had invited us there, who was quite gifted psychically actually, didn't feel any of this, though she appeared uneasy to us, but she wasn't able to name it the way that we were. So we did this ceremony, and immediately to us the atmosphere appeared to change. It was kind of like on hold, like we had permission to stay there. And shortly after we finished the ceremony, the nun who had invited us there came back from San Francisco,
Yes.
and the minute she stepped in the door, she looked around and said, oh my God, it feels so different here now. And so we proceeded with the workshop over the next several days. And though we felt much more comfortable there, strange things continued to happen, especially somehow with me, like I was some kind of conduit for energy or something. Because every time I would go to turn on a lamp or a light switch for an overhead light, the bulb would pop. The glass wouldn't break, but the filament would pop, and the bulb would be useless.
Yep.
And eventually I went through every single extra light bulb in the house, almost 50 light bulbs, and finally we decided that I was no longer allowed to operate any of the light switches, and other people had to do it for me. And for some time after that, even in other houses that I would stay, I would have similar experience with light switches, or like an earlier caller tonight, various appliances would turn themselves on and off, especially televisions and clothes dryers in the middle of the night. And then after a few weeks, it sort of dissipated.
Boy, I've got a lot of electronics around here. I wouldn't let you anywhere near my house.
Well, I haven't really had experiences since then, and I didn't feel any disturbing feeling with those continued experiences.
I know, but anybody who can kill 50 light bulbs...
Well, it was very odd, but the rest of the workshop proceeded very well. And then later, I asked independently 2 different psychics and a rather gifted medium that I know, and they all got similar impressions, almost kind of stereotypical that you might hear. They all felt that retreat center had been built on either an Indian burial or ceremonial ground. And I later did some research and found that in that particular part of San Francisco Bay, because this house was right on part of the bay,
Yes.
that in that area there were indeed a number of different ceremonial and burial grounds, so I couldn't find information about that particular piece of land.
Still, anything that would keep nuns' spirits locked in a physical location, that's something to think about.
Well, it felt like very, very powerful energy to all of us.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And take care. That's not good. I mean, nuns, as I said, they're supposed to proceed without passing go. And if they don't, then, you know, what's in store for us, right? Who have lived the lesser life. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to say I love the show.
Thank you. I can barely hear you.
How's it?
A little better.
Okay.
Where are you?
I'm in Pearl, Mississippi. My name's Steven.
Okay, Stephen.
Well, about the end of last summer, some friends of mine and I were spending the night at our church. I guess being in the Bible Belt, you know, church is an essential part of our social life, you know.
Sure.
And it was about the middle of the night, and the youngest of us, who was probably about 10 at the time, he wanted to get a Coke. And all the lights in the church, except for the classroom that we were in, were turned off. And so I, being the oldest, was volunteered into going to get the Coke.
Of course.
And so I go to open the door, and I get the creepy feeling, you know, like the last caller was talking about, that you know, something's not right. And so I grab the nearest thing that I can find, it at the wooden cross. I walk to another classroom to get the Coke, and I stopped dead in my tracks because I hit a cold spot. And I've been having experiences like this since I was about 9 years old. So I
Cold spot in a church.
Pardon?
In a church.
In a church.
Okay.
Of all places. And so I called 2 of the others to come, you know, check this out, see if they felt what I felt, and they felt it. And so I grabbed a golf club because one of my friends had brought his golf club to have the slightest idea why, but I grabbed one of those. Not that I could do anything with it if a ghost came at me, you know.
Has it later occurred to you that a golf club versus a spirit?
My point exactly. I have the slightest idea why I did it.
It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, but
Really?
All right, go ahead.
And so we proceeded to go down the hallway, and the youngest one, he stopped, and then the next one stopped, and I looked at them, and I couldn't figure out what it was. They had just turned pale as sheep, I turned to see what they were looking at, and there was a woman in the hallway. And there were a half dozen of us, and we were all,
Was she fully manifested? In other words, fully in the physical, or not?
She was definitely there. we could see her, we couldn't see through her, and she was, shining.
Shining.
And so we had,
You didn't yell for and take a swing, did you?
No, I don't think so. No, we all turned heel and ran for our freaking lives,
That's more like it.
one of the only smart colors here, I guess.
Well, I understand the guy was in the business. He would go investigate, obviously. He was
very true.
Very curious. But for everybody else, I'd turn tail,
right.
I'm with you, and I'd run, and that's what you did.
Right, and so I get back to the classroom, and we're trying to tell the other guys. They're all skeptical about it. And they're like, yeah, right. And my younger brother, who happens to be asleep across the room from me right now, I'm trying to keep quiet, he looks out the door and just points. His eyes wide as saucers. And we all look, and there's a huge, unhumanly huge arm.
Arm.
An arm.
Oh, God, this is like the hand.
Like, it's not floating in midair, but like reaching around the door.
Oh.
So we all back up against the opposite wall.
At least.
And I turn away, and there's a window. And you can't really see through it because it's not flat glass. It's kind of it's a weird kind of glass that you can't see through.
Right.
And there was a pattern of light moving around on it. And at this point, we were all completely freaked out. And so we ran for the nearest way to get out of the building, which was a clear door, and we saw a face with the dreaded glowing eyes.
Oh, the glowing eyes.
I'm sure that, and at that point, I realized they might not be able to kill you physically, but they sure as anything give you a heart attack, because I just about dropped dead.
Oh, I do understand. I think that it's entirely possible to scare a human being to death.
Oh, yeah.
Without question, to stop somebody's heart. And that situation sounds like a heart stopper to me.
Right. And
so how'd you get out of there?
Well, we all got it, and we all not sat down, but huddled together in one of the classrooms, and some of us started praying, some of us started just, doing whatever we could to get our minds off of it, and nothing else happened that night, but it's been a recurrent thing ever since.
Well, this is beginning to bother me. You just told me a story about a church, pretty terrible story, and the caller before was telling me about nuns being trapped in this place, begging to be released. What do these things tell us about the afterlife? Maybe nothing we want to hear.
That's very true.
Oh, brother.
I don't think that these were dead people, though. I think it was, angelic and demonic beings, whether going against each other or, the angelic beings trying to protect us. I haven't the foggiest idea.
Maybe some kind of war going on in there.
Very possibly. That's the prevailing theory among the few of us. I'm the only person who's even ever actually told anybody about it.
I presume it is something that you will never forget for the rest of your life.
I don't think so.
I don't either. And by the way, your portable phone's battery is about to give out.
It is.
It's a good thing you got your whole story in. All right, my friend. Thank you very much for the call.
You too.
You take care. By the way, on Friday, this coming Friday, this By Then Radio Ghost is going to be out haunting the Circuit Court for Davidson County in Nashville, Tennessee, beginning about 9 o'clock in the morning, looking for justice. And the haunting will continue until we get it. Just a thought. Here's something from Alaska. It was the middle of the winter, 1971 in Alaska, Palmer, Alaska. The snow was already on the ground for a long time. I know about that. And with the temperature had turned crunchy. You all know what that's like, right? With the cold, the occasional wind polishing the top layers of snow on this night the moon was full. Visibility was good due to clear skies. One of my household chores was to take out the trash. My little note, I still do that, by the way. Tonight was the night to do it. Our family lived in an apartment complex nestled in the woods. Then the city wasn't as big as today, so it was still rustic. You lived in Alaska, probably know what I mean. Yes, I do. The garage facilities, or shed, if you will, which it really should have been called, was on the opposite end of our complex, and so I set out to haul the trash. Once I got to the other side of the building, it was quiet, visibility pretty good, moon lighted the night pretty well. After having dumped the trash, I was standing there, just taking in the evening stars, pretty to look at on a winter's evening in Alaska. Then I heard crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound, obviously, of somebody or something walking in the snow. As I trained my senses and eyes to the source, it seemed the sound was moving toward me. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was indeed moving closer and closer. Was it a dog, a person, a moose? My eyes were straining, trying to see it. Closer, yet the sounds came. Before I knew it, the sound was on top of me. My eyes looked out toward the source of the sound. Crunch, crunch, crunch. And I knew something was near. I looked at the ground and saw something walking towards me. Art, there was nothing in front of me. I looked down again, expecting to see at least footprints, and I did. But they weren't footprints. The prints were hoof prints. And whatever was making them was almost in front of me, literally in front of me, but nothing was physically there. Whatever was walking toward me was on two legs. It stopped right in front of me, my mind racing as my heart pumped and the adrenaline pumped. I stood there in shock. My jaw must have been hanging open. And I was wide-eyed. I reached out my arm and waved it in front of me, and was waving in thin air. I did what any kid would do. I turned around and ran like hell. Ran as fast as I could back home. I don't know what it was, but that's what happened to me. There's an Alaskan story for you. First time caller line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hello, Art. This is Sean in Grosse Ile, Michigan.
Hi, Sean.
My story goes back to 1965 or 6 when I was a 5-year-old kid in Chicago down on the south side in Hyde Park.
Yes.
We moved into a house that was an old wood frame house, and they're very rare in Chicago because in the Chicago fire, almost all of them burned down back in the 1800s. So as we moved into this house, as a kid and with my parents, we'd explore, and up in the attic there was some charring where there had been a fire in the attic, and there was an old, maybe maid's quarters up there in this area, which was interesting. But as my parents explored around the attic, they found boxes of old glass negatives. Are you familiar with those?
I am, yes, I remember them.
And the funny thing that I didn't find out till later was they only showed we kids some of these negatives because some of them were actually very pornographic. But we only knew that there were these old pictures of old days back in Chicago up there. Well, as time went by, the attic was accessible through one of those drop-down stairways,
yes.
Continuously we'd hear little sounds and the lights would be on up there. Well, we went through a project for about a half a year restoring the banister going upstairs. It was an old mahogany banister, so the whole family would be there. That was our entertainment for a long time. And we kept hearing sounds and thumps and footsteps and a sound almost like a bag of potatoes rolling out upstairs. And my dad finally one night grabbed a meat cleaver because he was sure this time it was so loud that there was somebody up there. So he grabbed a meat cleaver from the kitchen, and our most loyal, brave dog in the world was with us, Gretchen, and she would not go with him. The hackles went straight up on her back, and she would not go. So he actually grabbed her by the collar because he thought he was going to have a confrontation. He went upstairs, pulled down the stairs to the attic. The light was on again, and he went upstairs, had to drag the dog with him, whimpering and crying and everything else, only to find nothing again. And what was really strange was we continued to hear these sounds, and it was just part of our lives for about 4 more months until we were ready to move from the house. And my dad packed these pictures up and got rid of them, shipped them out, and it all went away.
It was in the pictures.
Oh, it was in the pictures. Yeah, we're almost positive that what happened was this fire that had happened up there probably took this maid's life, and they were her pictures, and no one knew about it, but she was, I'm sure, worried about being found out through time.
I understand.
When they finally went away, that was the end of it. She was able to go off into peace.
Whew. Well, the implication of that is that if there is something that strong in life that we're afraid of being found out, we can't be released in death. And, you know, I've heard this again and again and again and again, and I would like to think, like an earlier caller, that the other side has no time and you're in two places at once, but you've got to imagine the other possibility, and that is that you really are trapped like that nurse.
Absolutely. As a 5-year-old, it was so real, and you're not really tuned into supernatural or fear in the same way, and it was such a real part of growing up. It was amazing.
A real part of growing up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And take care. Imagine if you knew there were pornographic pictures of you, and you had them, I don't know, stored somewhere the way this lady apparently did. But you died. And you knew you were going to be found out. You knew that eventually they would be found. Would such a thing keep you on Earth? Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hi.
How you doing, Art?
Okay.
About the mid to early 90s, excuse me. I was logging up here in Northern California.
Oh, you mean back in the days when you could actually log in California?
Yeah, we used to be able to do that. But anyway, it was a burn, lightning strike, hit it and burned up quite a few 1,000 acres. But anyway, in amongst this burn was an Indian burial ground, or maybe a medicine area. Okay, we finally moved into that area, and I was waiting for the trucks to gather up. We had all our machinery there, and it was a circle of oak trees. Anyway, one truck come dragging in. He said, "Oh, this is the place. I'm going to get my shovel out and go scratch around and look for artifacts." And I'm half Native American. I said, "This is not a thing to do." Well, anyway, it took me quite a while to consider, to...
Meaning you were saying, don't be logging here?
Don't be scratching around with your shovel looking for artifacts.
Much less logging.
Right. So anyway, we finally got set up. First of all, we're talking brand new equipment. The skidder didn't start. Batteries are dead. Second of all, finally got the skidder started. Then my machine wouldn't start. Well, anyway, after half a day of getting everything going, we finally got going. Okay, the guy with the shovel, we got him loaded up. He got out of the woods. The next truck, we got him loaded. His truck caught on fire.
Caught on fire?
Yes. And the third truck, the 40-foot trailers, vans.
Oh, I've seen them.
Yeah, okay. The third truck, he's halfway up the hill, and the trailer broke in half.
Well, that's beyond the pale. At that point, you've got to decide this was not a project to be.
Well, that's what happened, Art.
Did you cease?
We finished the job. It was quite expensive, but...
You finished the job?
Yes, sir.
How's life been?
Oh, well, it's been all right. Like I said, Art, I'd like to thank you for many, many, many years of outstanding radio program.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
And I'll miss you. Bye.
Take care. All right. Now the rules are not to do that. Not tonight. It's just ghost to ghost. I appreciate the sentiments, but as I said, I'm not easy. I'm not good on goodbyes, so I appreciate it. But only ghost stories this night. Only ghost stories. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi,
Yes.
this is Josie from Rhode Island.
Hi, Josie. How's Rhode Island this morning? Well, it's pretty late there, huh? Early, actually.
Yeah, it's almost 4:30.
Right.
I had the strangest occurrence happen to me about a week and a half ago.
Yes.
I was listening to your program, and I fell asleep on the couch. And then when I woke up, I realized your program was all through. So I got up, went to shut the radio off, and it was totally off.
You mean it wasn't on?
It wasn't on. The radio was completely off.
You mean you were hearing my show without the radio?
Well, I had fallen asleep, while I was listening to it.
Yes.
The radio was on.
Yes.
And then when I dozed off for a while, and then when I woke up, your program was already off.
And the
So I
radio was actually physically off.
It was physically off.
You didn't have a sleep timer on or anything?
Nothing. There's nothing. It doesn't have a sleep timer. It's just a regular radio. And I looked at it. I said, this is weird. And I turned the on button. I put it on. It went on. And then I shut it back off again. It was totally off. I just couldn't believe it. I looked at it and I was just staring at it, and I'm saying, what happened?
Well,
go off?
When it's my program, you never know.
But you weren't on that night. It was that man that's going to take over. Was it Mike Siegel?
Mike Siegel.
It was him that was on that night.
Same program, though.
Yeah, same program. But he was on that night. And I couldn't believe when I went to the radio, it was totally, I said, what in the world? I was just in shock. I said, who shut this off?
I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know. I can't, I don't understand it. And...
Well, there are a lot of things in life we don't.
I know.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
You take care back there. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Mr. Bell. This is Cheryl in Sumner, Washington.
Welcome.
I have sort of an Amityville tale.
An Amityville tale?
Yes, sort of. About 15 years ago, my husband of then and my two teenage daughters, we moved from California to Dodge City, Kansas, and my sister and her husband was already living there. And, of course, we needed a house, and she went out house hunting with me, and we found this really precious two-story refurbished house.
Well, I'll tell you, Dodge City's kind of an eerie place.
Yes,
anyway.
it is. And I wish I had time to tell you all the eerie stories that happened to us there, but I'm only allowed one story. But I have some doozies. Anyway, so believe it or not, the house was on Elm Street. So, that should have told us something then,
Yeah.
So, but it was just an adorable place. So we called the realtor, and he showed us the house. And my sister is psychic, by the way, and she astral travels out of her body and everything. But both of us had sort of a funny feeling when he showed us the house. But we didn't want to say anything to each other. We just kind of, we thought, well, maybe it means nothing, And the house was just adorable. They had completely refurbished it, and it was just darling. Anyway, so we went ahead and moved in, and it had the 2 bedrooms downstairs and a sunroom and the living room, dining room and kitchen, and then upstairs was a bedroom, like an office room, and another small bathroom. And we'd only been there about a week, and things just started happening, just Amityville type stuff.
Like what?
Oh God. We would wake up in the middle of the night and there'd be water running, and we'd go downstairs, and the kitchen sink, the water would be filling up in the sink, and our whole kitchen was flooded with water. There'd be black stuff in the downstairs toilet.
Black stuff?
Black stuff. My daughter in one of the bedrooms, she would tell me she didn't want to sleep in there anymore because there was a lady with a black dress that sat on the end of her bed, and she didn't want to be in
a black dress.
Like the old-fashioned black dresses, the long sleeves with the little lace collars, and like the the old, like in the cowboy days.
Well, I surely do remember the Amityville house, and that house, by the way, I believe stands unoccupied today. You're back on the air again.
Yes, sir.
There was your long, cool woman in black dress.
I like that. I wish I had time to tell you all the amazing things, but I'm just going to try and touch on what I can.
Black in the toilet, that's bad.
Black in the toilet's bad, but it gets worse. I mean, like I said, there was this lady that always appeared in my one daughter's bedroom, and she never did anything. She just sat there on the bed, and then across the hall was my other daughter's bedroom, and she was one that liked a little bit of light on in the hallway, and she'd wake up in the middle of the night and her door was shut and she couldn't get out her door, and she'd bang on her door screaming, and my husband and I slept upstairs, so I'd have to come down and try to get her door open. Finally, we started stacking bricks and books and stuff in front of her door so it wouldn't close at night. And then, but still, those would be moved and a door would shut. Okay, I would take a bath downstairs. Someone would come behind me and start whispering to me. Upstairs in the bedroom, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and my husband's face would look like an old woman's face.
Oh, no.
In the upstairs bathroom, it was just like, it just had a shower and a sink and a toilet. And in the middle of the night, we'd wake up and there'd be water squirting out of the sink like a waterfall, and there'd be water in the hallway. Let me think. Our washer and dryer was down in the basement. So my daughters and I, we'd go into the basement and do the laundry, and the door would shut and lock us in there. And obviously we stopped doing any of that at nighttime because the lights started going off at night, and then we'd be locked in the basement with the lights off. Then we tried burning candles, and then they'd be... So we didn't do any laundry at night anymore. And...
What'd you do with this house?
Oh, well, we only lived there about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months maybe. My daughters and my sister's children, they went to the Catholic school around the corner. There was a Catholic church there. And... finally, it started getting really bad. Just horrible things kept happening. My husband was a trucker, and he'd leave like at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I would start hearing someone walking up and down the stairs, coming up and down the stairs. Finally, I would have him wake me up, and he'd take me downstairs, and I'd sleep in the sunroom because it was the only, what I called the clean room, that was the safest room. My daughters started spending the night at their friends a lot. There would be a form that would be, now, this house had all new everything in it, new carpet and everything, and there'd be this form that looked like a person laying in a fetal position, and there'd be a black stain on the carpet, and then it would go away. Finally, my sister and I couldn't take it anymore, so we went to the Hall of Records, and we checked out the house, and we found out that the lady had bought the house, and she refurbished it. I won't give any names here, of course. That wouldn't be right.
Thank you.
And she had bought the house from, it was the estate of the people that sold the house of the old woman that lived there. And her husband had died in the house, and the son, I guess the son had been found on the living room floor in that position. The husband had something wrong with his leg, and he walked funny, so I guess that's the sound we'd hear on the stairs. And the old woman, she went to the Catholic church, and she finally stopped going, and they came over to check on her, and she had become, she wouldn't even leave the house, and they finally had to drag her out of there and put her in a home, and she kept screaming and saying that no, she would die in her house, and she didn't want to leave it. Well, they would put her in a posy, at the old folks' home, and she'd get out of that, and she was always trying to escape. Anyway, she finally passed away. So anyway, when we checked the records of what we came up with, we felt like there was some sort of an evil in the house, but the old woman was somehow, I don't know, either the force or whatever it was pulled her there, and her soul couldn't go to the light, and so she was like earthbound in this house. Gotcha. So then we went and got the priest over at the church, and he came to bless the house.
Well, this really is Amityville.
Do I still have time?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So we had 2 cats and 2 dogs. They wouldn't go upstairs. So the priest came. He came in the house, He went upstairs. He started sweating real bad. He started becoming real ill. He said, and so he buzzed the house as good as he could. He said he had to leave. Anyway, he had to serve Mass later that afternoon, and he fainted at Mass, and he became real ill for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then when we go to Mass, he wouldn't talk to us. And so finally, we started blessing the house ourselves, and I believe that we finally sent the old woman to the light, and her grave settled. We had heard that when there's still a mound over the grave and it hasn't settled, that means the spirit's earthbound. We don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, the grave settled because we found her grave. And there was a baby that would cry, and it was just...
believe me, I've got this picture graphically. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
And good night to you. Oh, my. Oh, my. Oh. Hey, Art. Since this is your last Coast to Coast on Coast to Coast, I thought I'd relate an interesting event that occurred several years ago. My friend's cousin lived in an old house in Trenton, New Jersey, that had been moved from Bordentown, New Jersey. It was previously used by Napoleon and his brother on visits to the area. Now, the story is not about Napoleon or his brother, but rather concerns the occupants of that house at around the same time. See, my friend's cousin had decided to remodel the house and appropriate the attic as a bedroom for their daughter. As her husband began the remodel, a series of peculiar incidents also began. This is sure sounding familiar. They included bedroom drawers being emptied and contents strewn about, cold spots in the home, and her husband being pushed down the attic steps. As we are particularly sensitive to ghostly activities, she called us to please come over and see if we could determine what or who could be causing these frightening actions. Arriving at her home, we proceeded to the attic, where I saw a young girl about 14 or 15 curled up in a corner. She seemed very distraught. During our dialogue, I asked her what was upsetting her, and she replied, "I've lost my ring. It's very special to me. And what is going to happen to me," she said. "He's giving my room to someone else." I assured her there was a better place for her, and before she was led to the light, I asked her name. "Sarah Cunningham," she replied. I related what Sarah had told me to my friend's cousin, who immediately turned a ghastly white and quickly left the room to retrieve something from her kitchen. "I found this morning," she said. I don't know where it came from or who it belongs to, and handed me a beautiful azimuth ring, about size 5, that she'd found in the kitchen faucets. I examined the ring and inside found the initials SC. Note, the house was also part of the tunnels that Napoleon had constructed to aid his escape in the event it was needed. An interesting article on the house ran in either the Trenton Times or the Trentonian at the time the house was moved from Bordentown to its present location. I have a photocopy of the article, but it's very poor and not scannable. Cheerio, Barb in Pennsylvania. Thanks, Barb. First time caller line, you're on the air. Hi.
Hey, Art, this is Travis in Quartz Hill.
Hi, Travis.
I'm a ride mechanic at a local amusement park down here in Southern Cal, and I just want to tell you a ghost story about one of our rides.
Fire away.
Some years ago, there was one of the mechanics that worked there. I guess it was his pet ride, and consequently, he had died, not at the park, but he suffered a heart attack at his home.
What kind of ride was it?
It's a big wooden roller coaster.
Right. Okay. Oh, yes, I remember those.
So, one of our electricians, I guess it must have been about a year later, was walking out to check the track at night. And he was checking proximity switches. I'm sure you're familiar with what those are.
Sure.
He's checking the proximity switches down in between the tracks, and he looked up, and here comes the guy who had died. Said that he checked all the switches at the trims, and you're good to go.
Really?
Yeah, and then I guess the electrician ran, and nobody's ever seen him physically, but there's been a few of us who have seen like the glow of a cigarette out on the track area, and he was very well known for chain smoking.
Good to go, huh?
Oh yeah, he said he's checking out his ride still.
I hear you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Take care. There you have it again. The same theme again and again. People that seem bound to earth. God, the question, is it their soul? Is it their consciousness? Is it really them? Sure would seem so. And again, I know that in our own minds we make it right by thinking that time is different on the other side, and that you can be in two places at one time, but maybe you can't. It's got to be at least an equal possibility, and it's pretty sobering to consider. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
How do you do?
I do okay.
Wonderful. This happened back when I had first gotten married back in 1976 to my first wife. And we had gotten up and routinely, it was my turn to make the coffee, I guess. So I had one of those, those old G percolators.
Sure. I had one of those.
You know how it is when you want to stand one of them things on end outside of itself, the basket and all that. And it's
you betcha.
Practically difficult, okay?
Yep.
So, hence the story. I had gotten up, it was my turn to make it, et cetera, and I took the guts out and cleaned them and so forth, set them aside, all in the rack to dry, while I went and proceeded to clean the pot itself. Well, I got the pot cleaned out and rinsed out, and I filled it full of cold water, and I grabbed the coffee, and I went over to, pick up the basket and stem and so forth, and they were gone.
Gone.
Right. They were no longer in the, the drainer basket.
Yes.
So I looked around, I looked on the table, I couldn't find them. I called my wife, she came in, I told her what had happened. And she's like, well, where'd you set it? In the drainer. She looked there, it's not there. She looked on the table. We proceeded to go through the whole house to find this thing. And we went back in the kitchen, and on the windowsill, standing, assembled, and ready to go in the pot minus the coffee.
Oh, no.
Yes, there it was. Bright, shiny, sparkling, clean, and balancing perfectly on a painted, a rough painted windowsill. Oh, yeah, and this is one of those old houses in Chicago that was built back behind the local bar.
Yeah.
Okay, and there have been stories about that place before we even moved in, but, everything was pretty much benign up to that point. But we spent a good half hour looking for them guts, and finally we came back in, and after like the third or fourth time, we looked around, and there it was sitting, gleaming in the sunlight, assembled and standing on end.
Well, it was a good act, but still in all, I don't know if I'd want to stick around.
Yeah, well, we didn't much after that, but...
Anything else like that ever happen?
Well, when I was much younger, living in my folks' house, I had been, we had just moved in about a year, and I was laying in bed one Saturday morning, and everybody was in the front room, and all of a sudden, I hear clank, clankety clank, clankety clank, going across over my head. Okay.
Over your head?
Over my head, in the attic. Nobody lives in the attic, Art. Nothing's in the attic except a couple of old boxes, but here, it sounds like somebody's dragging a 20-pound chain.
Nothing human.
No. Whatever it was, we had to weigh a ton because of the way it was walking. And I went up there and looked, and of course, nothing. But this was early on a Saturday morning.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, sir. I would just be very careful in life, that's all.
Yeah.
You take care.
You too.
Right. No clunking with nobody living up there. And then the coffee maker. Well, Maybe there is no linear time on the other side, and maybe that thing was just on the way to get coffee.